London's Mayfair district represents a peak of modern affluence and professional achievement. It is an environment built for comfort and success. Philosopher Alain de Botton coined a term for the specific psychological pressure found in environments like this: status anxiety. He defines it as the persistent worry that we are failing to conform to societal ideals of success, risking our dignity and respect. This chart maps global metrics of wealth and digital connectivity against clinical vectors of generalized anxiety and depression. The two lines are sharply diverging. We have built cities and digital networks designed to maximize connection and streamline achievement. Yet these exact structures are producing record levels of psychological distress. Solving this paradox requires looking at three distinct layers of human experience: the evolutionary mechanics of our psychology, the specific user interface designs of modern platforms, and the existential philosophy of how we confront our own mortality. Modern status anxiety functions as a highly engineered trap, systematically enforcing an inauthentic mode of existence. In 1954, psychologist Leon Festinger outlined a basic premise of human cognition. We lack an objective internal metric for our own value. To determine our personal worth, we evaluate how we stack up against the people around us. This models how we manage those evaluations. When we compare to those worse off, downward comparison, the central node receives a temporary, stabilizing boost. But looking up at those achieving more increases the psychological risk. When the gap becomes unachievably wide, it triggers positional bias. The comparison metric collapses into resentment and deep feelings of inadequacy. Our psychological baseline requires comparison to measure worth. Because this is hardwired into our cognition, our internal standards for success are entirely vulnerable to external manipulation. Digital platforms actively configure the environment through specific technological affordances, architecting the digital space to direct human behavior. User interfaces extract complex human worth and distill it into quantifiable data points. A person's value is reduced to a follower count, while highly curated highlights are packaged into easily digestible stories. The algorithms powering these interfaces act as active gatekeepers. They intentionally filter out the average, relatable social interactions that previously stabilized our offline comparisons. This network graph reveals the algorithmic priority. The system suppresses the vast majority of users and exclusively magnifies the top tier. Users then evaluate their own unfiltered daily reality against this highly curated, unattainable digital representation. These platforms do not passively reflect human desires. They systematically weaponize our positional bias, locking users into a perpetual, unachievable upward comparison loop. At the apex of this engineered ecosystem is the influencer, a curated persona presenting an optimized portrayal of success, beauty, and happiness. Influencers leverage a psychological mechanic called digital intimacy. By responding to comments and sharing seemingly mundane daily details, they feign commonality and closeness while maintaining an impenetrable aura of perfection. This pseudo-relationship bypasses our logical defenses. Though we know the imagery is edited, the interaction feels deeply personal, making the upward comparison immediate and unavoidable. The behavioral consequences spill into reality. Individuals engage in excessive spending, adopt dangerous diets, and suffer severe anxiety, attempting to close an artificial gap that was designed to remain open. An influencer is a highly engineered benchmark. Their continuous presence rewires the user's baseline definition of what constitutes an adequate life. If this cycle causes so much clinical distress, we must ask what purpose it actually serves. What is this algorithmic obsession hiding us from? In Leo Tolstoy's novella, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, the protagonist lives a life defined entirely by social conformity. He pursues status, correct furnishings, and the approval of his peers, only to find it entirely hollow when he falls terminally ill. Philosopher Martin Heidegger described this condition as falling into the they, conforming to the crowd's metrics to avoid taking individual responsibility for our own lives. Heidegger argued that authentic existence requires embracing being toward death. This is the terrifying, inescapable confrontation with our own human finitude. This diagram illustrates the philosophical evasion. On one side is the stark reality of finitude. On the other, the frantic metric of status. The superficial anxiety of losing social standing eclipses the much deeper, heavier anxiety of our own mortality. Obsessing over a digital feed is a deliberate flight into inauthenticity. It acts as an active defense mechanism against confronting the boundaries of our time. The relentless focus on external metrics serves a functional purpose. It fills the awareness with manageable, superficial worries. This chronic status anxiety provides a psychological buffer, successfully insulating the individual from the weight of their own finitude. We have a biological drive to compare ourselves to others. Algorithms exploit this drive, trapping users in an endless upward comparison to evade the heavy reality of existence. Breaking this cycle requires a two-part approach. Clinically, psychodynamic therapy focuses on making these unconscious patterns visible, helping individuals detach their core self-worth from external metrics and professional achievements. Philosophically, Heidegger offers the concept of the call of conscience. This is an internal, awakening force, an uncomfortable realization that summons the individual to reclaim their authentic self from the dictates of the crowd. Answering this call today means severing the algorithmic feedback loop. It requires rejecting the engineered benchmarks of the feed and accepting our fundamental human limitations. Authentic relief requires stepping off the competitive board entirely. It demands the courageous acceptance of a finite, individual existence that no longer requires the validation of an algorithmic crowd.